Imagine if every time you buy a sandwich, someone cuts a third of it off, throws it in the trash, and then charges you full price for the remaining 2/3. How would you respond to that? Would you accept it? Would it be any different if you threw that third away yourself? Now, what if, instead of going into the trash, that third of your sandwich got fed to animals instead? Would that make things better? Would you still buy the sandwich? Imagine if the store knew that the sandwich wouldn't keep, so they gave you a 70% discount on it. Having that information, would you still buy the sandwich? If most of your answers were no, then I have some pretty disappointing news for you. This is essentially how our food system operates on a daily basis. A third of global food production is never eaten. It's thrown away. I'm Jessica, and I'm a founder of a food tech startup. But you don't need me to tell you that food waste is a huge problem. We can simply look at the numbers. According to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, 1.3 billion tons of food are wasted each year. Now just think about that number. 1.3 billion tons. That's enough to feed every single person in China and in Europe. And food waste has quite a significant climate impact. In landfills, food generally decomposes into methane, a greenhouse gas that has more than 80 times the warming potential of carbon dioxide. Food waste generates 3.3 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year. And eliminating food waste would have the same effect as taking 35 million cars off the road. Imagine if Canada were to get rid of all of their cars. And this waste translates into massive financial losses, both for businesses and for individuals. Each year, the industry spends over $1 trillion producing food that is never consumed. I think it's clear from these discussions that food waste is not only highly inefficient in terms of resource use and distribution, it's also a huge environmental threat, and it's extremely bad for the economy. Eliminating food waste would allow us to feed an extra 2 billion people. We would be able to entirely offset the carbon footprint of India, and we would be able to recover the GDP of Mexico all in one go. So that seems like a pretty good initiative, right? But what are we actually doing to address this problem? Well, the UN did what the UN does best, and they created a Sustainable Development Goal. So SDG 12.3 aims to halve global per capita food waste by 2030. But does anybody know how we're actually progressing towards this goal? I mean, how are we going to be able to say in 8 years' time that we've actually achieved this target? What are the metrics that we should be looking at, and where are they now? Well, turns out that there's a few kinks we haven't quite worked out yet, such as what actually is food waste anyway? One would think that after all of the G20s, the COP26s, and the World Economic Forums, that we would have a clear and standardized definition. But that's simply not the case. The EU's definition differs from the USDA's definition, which differs from the UN's definition. And these definitions leave a lot of room for questions, such as, are ugly vegetables considered food waste? What about food waste that gets repurposed into something else? And is food only considered waste if it's thrown away? If we can't even agree on how to define food waste, how are we going to be able to work towards reducing it? So, for simplicity's sake, let's go with the most commonly accepted definition of food waste. Food waste is food that is not eaten and thrown away. And now that we have defined food waste, how are we actually resolving this problem? Well, most of today's food waste solutions prevent food from being thrown away. After all, that is the UN's definition of food waste. Food waste is food that doesn't get consumed because it's discarded. And today's food waste solutions can be found in a couple of different categories. We have redistribution systems, we have marketplaces where individuals can buy leftovers from businesses, we have peer-to-peer marketplaces for unused food, we have dynamic pricing tools, we have expiry management systems, and we have waste tracking solutions. But all of these solutions only prevent food from being thrown away. What about food that gets redistributed and not thrown out? That, technically, as per our definition, is not food waste. But we should ask ourselves, are we actually helping when perfectly edible food is given to farmers as feed for animals? Is that actually a desirable outcome? Should a baker put in the resources, cost, and labor necessary to make artisanal sourdough bread only to feed it to pigs? I mean, pigs don't need sourdough bread. In fact, they should be eating vegetables and roots and grass. So this is neither an optimal solution for the baker, nor is it for the pigs. And in the process of all of this, we have generated 0.5 kilo of CO2 producing every loaf of bread that nobody wants. So let's say that instead of giving his bread away, the baker decides to sell it on a platform where individuals can buy his leftovers. However, these platforms often profit off of the fact that food businesses regularly overproduce and have waste that they need to get rid of at the end of the day. They often charge a transaction fee for sales on the platform. So now, not only does the baker lose out on getting a fair return for his bread, but he actually has to pay someone else to take that bread off his hands, and he'll only get a nominal amount in return. So this isn't really an ideal solution for the baker. But what about the buyers? Do they win? How many times have you bought a mystery bag of leftovers because you needed a sourdough bread? The truth is that most people on these platforms, they're looking for a bargain. You're on there looking to score a deal. You're on there because you can buy a lot of food for cheap. You're not necessarily on there because you need that loaf of sourdough bread. Because if you did, you probably would have gone to the store and you probably would have paid full price. So let me ask you, show of hands, don't be shy now. How often have you bought a mystery bag of leftovers and got what you wanted? Okay. How often have you bought a mystery bag of leftovers and were actually able to finish everything in the bag? Okay. Because I've seen some businesses stuffing trash bags full of bread because they had so much left over. That's right. Trash bags. How am I supposed to finish a trash bag full of bread before it goes bad? These businesses are now pushing their waste onto me. And what's genius is that they're actually paying a third party to redirect their waste problem onto someone else after already having put in the resources and the cost necessary to make all of this food. So, who wins here? Do I win? Well, sort of, yeah. But the stress of having to find something to do with a trash bag full of bread may outweigh the benefits of getting it for cheap in the first place. Does a baker win? Not really. And the environment definitely loses out on inefficient use of resources. Unfortunately, many of today's food waste solutions simply encourage unnecessary purchasing. How often have you bought pasta sauce that's about to expire because you actually needed it? And how many times have you bought something that's about to expire simply because it's cheap? And how often were you actually able to use that ingredient before it went bad? I think it's clear from these discussions that the challenges related to food waste cannot simply be solved in a vacuum. They need to be resolved alongside challenges related to profitability, efficiency, and true demand. Yet, most of today's food waste solutions fail to address the root cause of the problem. These solutions are great when you already have leftovers, but they're merely addressing symptoms of a much bigger issue. And that's suboptimal planning. You have leftovers because you decided to make too much. You have leftovers because you bought more than you actually needed. And without addressing this core challenge, overproduction and the losses it represents for businesses will remain the status quo. Waste will continue to get pushed onto consumers, and consumers will continue to waste their money buying things that they don't actually end up eating. A McKinsey study found that food waste generated at the end of the supply chain, for example, in households, represents more than 8 times the energy utilization as that generated far earlier on the farm level. This means that producing food which is ready for consumption is 8 times as energy intensive as simply producing the raw ingredients. Think about where your bread comes from. A farmer had to plant seeds, he had to grow wheat. That needed to be harvested, milled, baked, packaged, and then distributed to your grocery store. That's when you buy it. And that's the point that we're focusing most of our food waste efforts today. However, it's highly inefficient to target food waste at the point where the food has already reached the consumer. Because at this point, we've already unnecessarily spent a massive amount of resources. So we need to be addressing overproduction far earlier in the value chain. What if we could shift our focus away from redistribution and towards prevention? What if, instead of redirecting waste, we could focus on how we can actually prevent leftovers in the first place? We should stop focusing on merely reducing food waste. It leads to suboptimal outcomes, and the industry needs to move towards more holistic and incisive solutions which actually benefit everyone along the value chain. Imagine if we could create solutions which strengthen the entire system, solutions which are advantageous for producers, retailers, consumers, and the environment. What if we started focusing on food optimization in order to move forward? We could use resources far more efficiently, and we could only produce what's really necessary. Instead of encouraging overproduction, which translates to losses for small businesses, we could find ways of supporting our neighborhood coffee shops, your local deli, that hole in the wall that makes the world's best cronuts. We could find solutions where these guys also win. And we can help them find that sweet spot between underselling and overproducing. And if we really wanted to help them, we should be paying full price. Imagine if we, as consumers, only buy what we eat and we actually ate everything that we bought. What if we were better at planning our meals and we always repurposed leftovers into new dishes which are both interesting and delicious? Only have we done all of these things, can we truly say that we're addressing food waste in a way where everyone wins? But I have some good news for you. We're already starting to see preventative initiatives at every stage in the food value chain. We've seen an explosion in precision agriculture, which uses data to help farmers produce more with fewer resources. Plant-based coatings have been developed to extend the shelf life of avocados and citrus fruits. Exponential improvements have been made in cold chain technology, which allows for far more efficient storage and transportation of harvested produce. Sensors are being used to track freshness levels on batches of produce, so retailers know which boxes of lettuce to open and put on the shelves first. Data analytics are helping retailers and distributors optimize ordering and reduce waste, and a plethora of zero waste and meal planning tools have been developed on the consumer side. And the best part is that contributing to food optimization is easy. And you can start today. So look in your fridge, get creative with your leftovers. If you buy something that's about to expire, build a whole meal around that. And if you happen to get a trash bag full of bread, take it to a homeless shelter and share your bounty. Thank you.